So today we're going to talk about the fall of Chamberlain and the various events and political machinations that led to that happening. Now, one of the really good things about the fall of Chamberlain topic is that it's pretty straightforward to write about because it's quite a self-contained event. There are lots of things that lead up to it, but there is nothing really too much in the future that you need to refer to. So it's a thing that's quite limited in time, which is very good. The other thing that's really good about it is that a lot of the things that you will have revised when you were looking over the preparations of war topic are also really relevant here. And that doesn't just include the facts and the evidence, but also the primary sources and the historical opinions. So just be really aware that when you're studying preparations for war or you're studying the fall of Chamberlain, where they overlap and where you could use a quote or a bit of evidence or a historical opinion from one and also use it in the other, because that's totally fine in the exam. You can use the same historical opinion, you can use the same fact, you can use the same piece of primary source evidence in more than one essay or more than one source question. As long as it's relevant, you can do that. That's totally fine. Okay, so these are the types of questions you can get about Chamberlain. You can see it's a topic that does tend to come up quite a lot. So in 2019 we had, to what extent was Chamberlain's resignation due to the failure of the Norway campaign? 2016, how much the sources A and B reveal about differing interpretations of Chamberlain's resignation. Specimen paper was, to what extent was Chamberlain's resignation due to his inability to gear the economy effectively for total war? And to what extent was Chamberlain's resignation due to his inability to gear his economy for total war again? And finally, value the use of source A as an explanation why Chamberlain had to resign his post as Prime Minister. Okay, so when we're thinking about the fall of Chamberlain, as I said, it's one of the easier topics to write essays on. It's relatively contained, it's relatively straightforward, and there's a lot of primary source material that you can really get your teeth into. And as I've said, it massively overlaps with the preparations for war topics, so that you can revise both of those together and see where they overlap. Also, when you're writing about this, it's quite easy to have an overarching theme that you can have some kind of answer that you're in your head that you're constantly making reference to in your analysis and evaluation. Now, for an essay, it could be that your theme could be just that Chamberlain just deep down wasn't suited to be a wartime prime minister, that the skills that he had were fine for peacetime but weren't good for wartime. Or your theme can be that he made so many mistakes in the 1930s with regards to the economy and with regards to appeasement that he had created too much animosity for him ever to be able to unite the country. If you do this, it really does help kind of direct your evaluation. You don't have to have a theme. You can just pick a particular aspect and say, like, this is the main reason. But having a kind of general overarching idea that you're constantly making reference to does make your evaluation quite a lot stronger. Okay, so if you were going to write an essay on this, or if you want to revise for it for doing one of the source questions, there are a few areas that you need to cover. And I think it's easier to kind of group these areas into specific headings, which are as follows. First of all, the economy. So you look at how Chamberlain failed in the economy, and how his failings in terms of directing the economy and organising it for total war were contributory towards him resigning. You look at the military failures that he had in terms of the lack of preparation in the armed forces and the lack of preparation in terms of developing key alliances, particularly Russia and America. You can look at the problems with the Labour Party and the workers in general. There was a lot of animosity towards Chamberlain from the left, obviously due to the economic problems in the 1930s and the fact that the Labour Party just downright hated him. You can also kind of think about the kind of general malaise that Chamberlain just was a bad prime minister when it came to the war, that he had a history of appeasement, which made it very difficult for him to convince people that he was strongly anti-Hitler, since he was photographed often talking to him and shaking hands with him and things like that. And he also, it's very clear that if you read any of his speeches, and you can quote extensively or quote parts from his speeches, that he really did fail to inspire the nation. And you can contrast that a little bit with Churchill. You can use a little bit of Churchillian rhetoric and compare it to Chamberlain's rhetoric and show that there was a real kind of difference between the two. And finally, obviously, very importantly, is that the Norway debate, the thing that ultimately, say, directly led to Chamberlain's resignation and his realization that he just wasn't popular anymore. Okay, the other thing just to remember that when you're doing this, as I've said, in the longer PowerPoint, is that Chamberlain resigns. He isn't forced to quit. He isn't sacked. He chooses to resign. So any essay that you write has to be clear on that point, that there were a lot of factors that made him very unpopular. So you can talk about how his unpopularity built up and built up and built up due to various reasons, his own failings, his animosity on the left, the economy, the military failings, all those kind of things. But you have to have somewhere a recognition that he wasn't sacked. He looked at the situation in the country and he chose to resign. And so any essay that does that has got to conclude that. And you can also have that as a point, and if that's a source question about that, you can say that, you know, it's important to remember that one of the reasons that Churchill stood down was his own realisation. As ever, if you have any questions about this, or if you have any notes you want me to look over, or any essay plans you want me to look over, if there's any past papers you want me to look at, please send them in and I will do my best to get them back to you.